this summer we'll be hosting 7 FIFA games. We're very excited about that. It's about a month of festivities that will be taking place, in Vancouver. I guess I'd say there's a couple aspects to it. One is the customer aspect of how we engage with folks and how we surprise and delight folks on the system, how we activate the system to be engaging. And so, we're doing some really fun things around that with our buses. You'll see things at our stations. We may have some new products coming out. So we're going to do some really cool stuff that will be, launching, in the lead up to FIFA, that we're very, very excited about, that is going to get people excited. It's going to get people coming to the region excited. We think there's upwards of maybe around, I think, 1 million people that are going to come to the region that are going to be traveling for FIFA games. So it's a lot of people.
Welcome to the Mobility Innovators Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mobility Innovator Podcast. I'm your host, Jaspal Singh. Mobility Innovator Podcast invite key innovators in the transportation and logistics sector to share their experience and future forecasts. In this episode, we'll be discussing the transformation journey of TransLink. Our today's guest is the CEO of TransLink. TransLink is a regulatory authority responsible for regional transportation network in Metro Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. It manages a massive integrated system of buses, rapid transit, ferry, and commuter rail. The agency achieved the annual boarding of 403 million in 2024. As a CEO, he oversees management, planning, finance, and the growth and delivery of public transport, as well as cycling and walking infrastructure, 5 bridges, and the major road network. Under his leadership, the agency achieved 90% of pre-pandemic ridership. Prior to his time at TransLink, he served as an administrator and CEO of Maryland Transit Administration. I'm so happy to welcome Quinn, the CEO of TransLink. Now it's time to listen and learn. Hello, Kevin. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to catch up with you and talk all things transit.
Great. I was checking your profile and I was doing a little bit of research on your background, and I want to kickstart our discussion about your professional journey in transit because it's quite interesting. I saw you started as a comprehensive planner with the city of Baltimore, 2004.
Yeah.
And then became a CEO of MTA Maryland in 2017, and then the CEO of TransLink in 2021. How's your journey feel when you look back from a comprehensive planner to CEO, the boss in the company? And I would also say, these are the 2 big transit agencies in North America. I'm in US and Canada. So how's your journey feel like, and what are the challenges you face in your journey?
Yeah, sure. It's on reflection, it has been quite a journey. It's true. I was a comprehensive planner. Another way to look at that is just a general community planner. And I was out in Baltimore, in East Baltimore specifically. I was assigned to that geographic part of East Baltimore. It was really more of a kind of a land use and zoning and community planner. So I was out at community meetings talking to communities about developments in their area, helping to kind of shepherd some of those developments through the land use and zoning city process, right? And that was a great way to really be kind of on the ground level, right? I feel like I very much learned, what's important to communities and how to work with communities and how important communication is. So I did that for a number of years. And then ended up getting into transit consulting. I worked for a small transit consulting firm called KFH Group, and really enjoyed working for them for a few years, and did some consulting work for the Maryland Transit Administration doing rural transit consulting for very small agencies. Anyways, I bounced around a little bit, but made my way up as the director of planning for Maryland Transit. Did that for a number of years, and then took on some big projects. And then eventually became the CEO, and it was a big jump for me at the time, and it was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I enjoyed doing it so much. COVID hit, that presented its own challenges back in 2020, as we all experienced, right? The pandemic, and then honestly, the job opened up in Vancouver, and as you well know, Vancouver has been known for a number of years for being state of the art, really great system, a lot of big investments over the years in transit and moving the Metro Vancouver region forward. And so I certainly jumped at the chance to be able to apply for the job. And nearly 5 years later, here I sit. So it has been quite a journey. I would just reflect that. It's for me, it's always about people, about helping people.
Yeah.
I believe a lot in public service and making communities better. And I think you can do that in a number of ways. I am particularly passionate about transit and about transportation improvements because there's many aspects of government and the way that government affects people's lives. I think what's really cool about transit is it's very on the ground.
Yeah.
It's a bus. It's literally a bus that shows up at your door, a train that shows up at the station to take you to work. It really is like this connector of economic development, of something you can touch and you can feel, of your tax dollars at work and communities getting better. And so I love the realness of it all.
That's true. That's true. Like you mentioned, you started your career talking to people, connecting with them. And I say mobility is all about people. You need to
Yeah,
understand how can you serve them. So I love your
yeah,
answer, and I really lucky to have you in the transit. It's good you chose this sector, because if you love transit, you need to love people. So
yeah.
it's very connected.
That's right. That's
Now,
right.
now your current role. So you moved from MTA Maryland to TransLink in 2021, and you said like it was during the pandemic. You were doing amazing job at MTA Maryland as well. I still talk to some of the people there, and they still remember you.
Well, thanks.
And I don't think 2021 was the right time to move during the pandemic, and a lot of agencies were going through major impact and all. Why did you decide to move and decide to take this role? And how do you feel after last 5 years taking this role?
Yeah. It's a big choice, right? Moving to a different country, moving to a different coast of North America was a big decision.
Hmm.
Um, I think ultimately, what I really saw was that I was really proud of the work that we did in Maryland,
Hmm.
and I think personally I was ready for a new challenge. And to be quite honest with you, I lived in Maryland my whole life. I was born and raised in Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., and ended up going to university in Baltimore and then stayed there. So
Hmm.
I'd lived in Maryland for a really long time, and I'd always been eager to go live and work somewhere else. What better place than Vancouver? What better system than TransLink? And so I felt and still feel just extremely lucky and very grateful to have made that move. But yeah, it was also during the pandemic. I mean, what a crazy time. I mean, honestly, who makes a decision to pick up their family and move and change jobs, change countries in the middle of a pandemic? I guess I did. Um, and sure, there were hurdles, but they were all uh, I was able, we were able to overcome a lot of those challenges. And again, maybe a theme here is all comes back to people, because
Yeah.
certainly a lot of people at TransLink very much welcomed me. I was welcomed to the community, and it has been a very what I would say welcoming experience coming to Metro Vancouver from the States.
Oh, I mean, I would say the team at both end. I am lucky to know both of them, MTA Maryland and TransLink. The people are amazing both side. Holly is doing great job, and I think
Yes, yes.
also that's a great credit to you as a leader. You able to create a second line of leadership, which is the important part of leadership.
Yeah,
Now, this
thanks.
is a global podcast, and I mean, it'll be great to share with people what exciting work and what amazing work TransLink is doing, which is a regional transit authority. There are very few transit authority in North America, and I would say TransLink is very special. Uh, what make TransLink special, and why other city couldn't able to copy the model which TransLink is working? Because I sometimes tell, like people ask me, what is a good example in North America? I said, like, look at TransLink model. It's very good
Oh,
governance
thanks.
and Transit 5. So why you think it's very unique, and why not other city could able to copy it?
Well, many years ago, well before my time, 40, 50 years ago, TransLink made a decision to pursue a regional model.
Hmm.
Vancouver decided to pursue a regional approach to growth and to development. Um, Originally back in the 1970s, the region adopted a plan that was cities in a sea of green connected by highways. And they amended that several years later to
Mm.
cities in a sea of green connected by transit. And what followed out of that was a real investment in Skytrain,
Mm.
um, the world's first driverless train system, debuting in 1986 as part
Yeah.
of the World Expo in Vancouver. Um, and that really set a lot of things in motion. That really set the backbone of the transit system. So you took this regional model, you took a big investment in a SkyTrain system, and everything has kind of fallen and flowed from there. The model today remains a regional governance model. So, TransLink has an interesting governance model, where we have a mayor's council that determines really the region's vision and priority
Mm.
projects. That's 21 municipalities, an electoral district, and a treaty First Nation that come together and determine the region's vision and priority projects. But we also do have a board of directors that operates more like what I would call just a traditional board, focused on costs and
Mm.
efficiencies and the fiduciary responsibility that a board really holds. It's a really interesting model, and it's not without its conflicts and its overlaps from
Yeah.
time to time. But I think, in contrasting it with some of my experience in Maryland, Maryland couldn't be more in the opposite end of the spectrum where, that transit agency really flows up to the governor's office.
Mm.
There's the governor, the secretary of transportation, and then the essentially the administrator, the CEO of the transit administration. So it's like, you literally go from one person at the top to two quite large governing bodies, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say that what's benefited Metro Vancouver in this way is when you take a regional approach with a lot of people, it may take a while to
Mm.
develop consensus and vision, but once you have it, you're on a path
Yeah.
and you have consistency of projects and consistency of direction and vision. When you have one person at the top, an election can change everything.
Yeah.
And that is a bit of the story of transit in Maryland and a lot of different states in the U.S. that fall under that governance model. So, one thing that I think's helped TransLink over the years is its governance and its
Mm.
consistency of governance in determining a vision and setting that vision for the long term.
So that you rightly said, it's always a challenge because if it's only one person, it has own priorities, and when you have a governance, a body, you always have consensus. And I
That's
can
right.
see your job is more like now connecting these mayors and connecting them and come to a consensus.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest achievement I would say you have done is like creating this transport 2050 plan, which has setting up the 10-year priority plan. Can you share a little bit more about how you see envision Vancouver 2050?
Sure. We're one of our legislative kind of legal requirements is to develop a 30-year transportation plan. And so, I came on to TransLink in 2021, and the team was well underway of this
Mm.
30-year plan that we called Transport 2050 that our board and mayors adopted in 2022. But that really envisions this long-term approach for the
Mm.
region. It envisions, quadrupling, rapid transit service, big increases in local bus service. It envisions active transportation playing more of a role than ever before.
Mm.
50% of all trips being active transit or
Mm.
active transportation or transit trips by the year 2050. So there's a lot of big goals and vision set out in that. Some of the important work that we did with our mayor's council was taking that 30-year transportation plan and getting consensus on, what do we want to tackle in the first 10 years, right? There's a lot.
Mm.
There's a lot in that 30-year bucket of things that we want to do. And so you've got to say, all right, folks, we've got to come down a couple levels and say, what do we want to do in the first 10? So we worked with our mayor's council and gained some consensus and really vision around that in a 10-year plan that we call Access for Everyone. And that
Mm.
Access for Everyone plan envisions 9 bus rapid transit corridors, continued investment in Skytrain, a doubling of local bus service, investments in active transportation. And that's been a really important guiding document to develop and pursue federal funding and pursue our own plans of BRT and SkyTrain and all that kind of good stuff. So, again, a lot of it does come down often to the planning framework that
Yeah.
you lay out in place, right? You've got to have good plans. You have to have policymakers and governance that buy into those plans. And in that way, we've tried to set a vision for the future that is ambitious. Yeah.
Oh, it's quite ambitious. I mean, 50% by active transport and PT by 2050. I mean, this will be major game changer, I think, for Vancouver. But I think it's a beautiful city. It's possible to achieve.
Yeah.
In
Thanks.
fact, you're on the right path. I mean, according to APTA ridership survey, TransLink has recovered the ridership faster than any other major transit network on the continent. I mean, Vomata is second one. I would say they are also doing amazing job. But
Yeah.
I would say, what is the secret of Vancouver public transit ridership recovery? Because you were pre-pandemic, I think you were 436 million journeys, and now you are 404 or 405, more than that. So you are quite 90% and above,
Yep.
whereas
That's
some
right.
of the agencies are still 50% in North America. So what is your secret?
Yeah. It's a big question, and happy to give some thoughts on this. So when the pandemic hit, you'll recall that ridership for so many agencies dropped, and
Yeah.
and we were no different. I think TransLink dropped to, I think it was around 14% of pre-pandemic ridership.
Yeah.
That was a huge drop for us. I think what was so critical was that, unlike other systems, we kept services running at near 100% levels, like
Mm,
99% levels. And part of that was due to relief funding that we received from the provincial and federal governments. That's not the story with other systems. There were other systems that reduced service 10, 20,
yeah.
30, 40%, that laid people off. There's something to be said about government services, transportation services that people can trust and rely on. And I think
Mm,
something that served TransLink really well is that throughout the pandemic, because we kept services running at near 100% levels, we never lost public trust,
mm,
right? Those riders, they may have been working from home. Many of them may have been working from home, but they didn't lose trust in us as a mover of the region.
mm,
And I think that was so important. At the same time, we saw population growth in the region.
mm,
We saw our region has hit around 3 million people today. It continued to rise throughout the pandemic, especially south of the Fraser in
mm,
Surrey and Langley. I think what's fascinating about that is, as you noted, we're about 92% ridership recovery, but that really differs based on the region, right? So
yeah.
overall, we're at 90. South of the Fraser in Surrey, it's like 120, 130, 140% ridership recovery, right? There are some places that have come back faster than others. And part
Mm,
of a reason of our success that I think is so important is we were able to react to that. We took a very different approach to how we did service planning and data analysis, and we adjusted service to where people needed it the most. And so, being responsive to riders while maintaining that trust, I think helped us be a leader in ridership recovery. The other piece that I'll just note that I always think is so important about the Vancouver context is
mm,
transit-oriented development and real estate. And,
yeah.
Metro Vancouver has a fascinating model of town centers. If you come to Vancouver, you'll see these variety of town centers with towers and high rises all around stations. That's very purposeful. And
Yeah.
so, Vancouver has done a really good job in a North American context, certainly, of collecting and generating that density around station areas to support ridership development and to support sustainability and people getting around and less driving, right? That's been very intentional. And so, land use, at the beginning, we talked about my beginnings as a land use planner. Those
Principal
that
or
that
the
that holds true for me, right? Even in this job, I believe very much in the importance of land use around transit and how
yeah.
important it is to create density around transit. And Vancouver's done a pretty tremendous job of that.
I think the point you mentioned about trust is very important. Any relationship, even relationship with rider, the trust make
Yeah.
reliability, and if they can rely on your service, they will continue to use. And I saw, like what you said about trust, some of the agency didn't reduce the service and they were lucky to recover faster, and some of them couldn't. And like you also like did a lot of data analysis, service planning, understanding where you need more service and where you can redistribute and all.
Yeah.
And the last point, I remember Jared Walker, he always say transit need density and density need transit, so it's
That's right.
both way feed to each other. No, I think this is very important. No, thanks for sharing. And I can see now it's growing faster. And sometimes I also tell people like the number of peoples are back in the system, but we are using less. So we should not compare it to the pre-pandemic level anymore. And we should just think about, okay, this is a new level of ridership and
Yeah.
people have changed their habit, working from home and that kind of a changes. Now, you mentioned about Vancouver was the first city to introduce automated urban rail system in 80s, and I was the first one. I mean, still, I would say after Montreal, like it's the only city beside Montreal which has a fully automated
Yep.
rail network, and I would say one of the longest fully automated driverless system in the world. I mean, you're operating three line with around 80 kilometer of length. Uh, can you share what is the future expansion plan of Skytrain? You mentioned like in the Transit 2050 in your plan in vision, you are looking after the expansion and how the city landscape can change in with the automated. Like why not other cities are implementing automated metro network in North America? Because I see it can help in a big way. Why they are not able to copy again some of the best practices from Vancouver?
Sure. So, Skytrain has been just so important and again, such a great backbone of the system. And it is expanding. The provincial government has made some really big investments
Yeah.
in SkyTrain expansion. So, there's really two big expansions going on right now. So one is what we call the Broadway Subway Project, which is
Mm,
about a 6 kilometer expansion of the Millennium Line that extends west out towards UBC. It doesn't fully go to UBC. It starts making its way there, and so there are certainly future plans to extend all the way that, I think UBC would like to see in the province, and we would like, everybody believes in
students
it,
too. Students
uh,
too.
students too, of course. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's expensive and
Yeah.
it's going to cost a lot to make that project happen, but there's always momentum around that. So, the project underway now gets it partially there, and so that's good and that's important. Another extension, I talked a bit about Surrey and Langley and the growth that we're
Yeah.
seeing south of the Fraser. The Surrey-Langley SkyTrain is about a 16-kilometer extension of the Expo line, going down all the way to the city of Langley. So, you know, these two expansions are, I don't know, over $10 billion of investment in SkyTrain. And again, will provide very fast, very frequent service to folks with, headways of, I don't know, 4 to 7 minutes,
Mm,
probably faster during some peak hours. And also provides those stations, again, those opportunities for transit-oriented development and some fantastic growth in the region. When all is said and done, we'll go from about 80 kilometers of SkyTrain to a little over 100
mm,
kilometers of SkyTrain. It'll be a game changer for the region. I think from what I understand, I think it's about a 27 or 30% increase in SkyTrain. I'll also just say that, I think what's fascinating about these two projects is that there's a lot of focus on the extension of the track itself, but behind the scenes, it's a generational change for us.
yeah.
We're in order to accommodate these two extensions, we're having to build a brand new operations control center. So,
Yeah.
we are still operating today in 2026, right? 40 years after the launch of SkyTrain and multiple extensions, we're operating out of the same control center that we did in 1986. If you saw it today, it's like a big closet,
Yeah.
with TVs, and these guys are crammed in there, right? And so we're building a new operations and control center, which is great. We're having to build a new operations and maintenance center
Mm,
to accommodate the additional maintenance and the addition of new Mark V SkyTrains that we've added to the system, which are bigger and longer and have 25% more capacity. So it's a from an internal perspective, it is a total change. It is a
yeah.
generational change in how we operate a SkyTrain system.
Yeah.
Everything is changing with these two extensions. That's a challenge. That's also a big opportunity to
Opportunity.
do things differently and to be more efficient and to streamline. Um, but we're gearing up. The Broadway Subway project extension is due to launch mid 2027, and
Mm,
Surrey Langley SkyTrain in 2029. So, we sit here in February of 26. So within just a few years, we will see these big expansions happen and these big behind the scenes projects also come to life.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's not just 20 kilometer or 20 plus kilometer. Actually, 20% of the length will increase. So it's a
Yeah,
major shift for the organization. And like you said, it's a generational change. You don't have these projects happen very frequently. And like you said, I've been to your old control center. I mean, I'll not say it's bad. It's nice. In fact, we like it. It's very close, and they showed us the new
yes,
building, which is
yep,
nicer. So
good.
but I agree with you. I think you need a new technology, you need new tools, and you need new space for the staff to work. So those control center. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You are at the right time at the agency. A lot of these changes are happening during your period, so it will be the
Yeah,
legacy. It will be the legacy for the organization.
yeah,
Now, another legacy you want to create, and I know you are very passionate about the bus rapid transit (BRT), and you really want to expand, BRT in big way, bus electrification, creating these dedicated line. And I would say you are the also lucky one having these trolley bus network in the world. Very few city. In fact, I
yeah,
was reading in North
yeah,
America, more than 40 city used to have trolley bus, and now only six left. So
yeah.
Vancouver is one of the good example where they keep. So how Transit is looking to expand the bus network and try to serve the customer, and why you think the BRT will be important. I know you say BRT is like a rail-like service on rubber tire, but why you think BRT will be important for the region and as well as for the city?
Yeah, just to talk for a second maybe about our trolley bus fleet. We're really proud of that fleet.
Yeah,
We're the second largest right behind San Francisco. It's around 260 trolley buses. We're looking to replace a lot of those in the coming years with brand new trolley buses. So, really, really exciting project there.
yeah,
And we're really proud of that. It's a zero emission technology that has stuck around for many, many years, and I'm so happy that that our system has that. BRT, our perspective is it just has a real opportunity to be a lower cost, easier, faster to implement alternative to Skytrain. This region has invested. We've talked a lot in this conversation about Skytrain and about
yeah,
how important Skytrain is. And Skytrain will always be so important to the way that this system moves. And we've got these two expansions underway. We'll see if in the future there's a further expansion to UBC. But Skytrain is also very, very expensive.
yeah,
It is very expensive. It takes years and years to build elevated Skytrain and put in the systems and the everything that goes along with Skytrain technology, right? It's a great big investment. It can cost a lot.
yeah,
I think from our perspective, in our 10-year plan, we identified 9 corridors, and then
mm,
for that were had high potential to be successful BRT corridors. We worked with our mayor's council to get that down to a top 3, and so those 3 are
mm,
essentially the North Shore to Metro Town, where there's not a rapid transit connection today. Um, also, kind of going east down King George Boulevard in Surrey, one of our main transit corridors today, where we're seeing a lot of people, and then also from Maple Ridge at Haney Place down to Langley. So these 3 corridors are 3 corridors that we're seeing a ton of growth over the past few years. We already have high transit ridership, and where there's really also municipal agreement
yeah,
with our local elected officials that more needs to be done faster. And
yeah,
so we've been out doing a lot of really good public engagement these past few months on these 3 corridors, and there's just really quite overwhelming support for
mm,
rapid transit options. Again, I think, can be delivered for a fraction of the cost of Skytrain, can be delivered a fraction of the time of Skytrain. We can use some of our existing fleet. I don't have to, buy a new light rail fleet and build a new light rail maintenance facility, right? You start to think through all those costs, and they really do add up over time.
yeah,
So I think from my perspective and the regional consensus we have is that BRT is the direction that we're going with these 3 corridors. They sit today unfunded, and so
oh,
maybe some
okay.
federal officials will be listening to this podcast, and we've sold them on this concept of BRT and the federal funding and provincial funding that we really need to make these projects happen.
Congratulations on that. I know. I mean, and I tell city like each mode has its importance. So I mean, we people love metro trains. It's sexy, it's look very sexy and nice. But now
Yeah,
the
yeah,
buses are good quality. You can have very good quality of buses and give a
that's right.
good kind of experience. And if you have a faster speed, you can reach faster. You don't need to go up and down. It's on surface, and you can move faster, and the transfer can be much faster. And I know, I mean, there is a lot of innovation happening in that space. So the buses can be really cool. And and Latin America, a lot of cities now have a very good bus rapid transit system, and it's working very
Absolutely.
well.
Yep,
So
yep.
no, congratulations. That's a big news, and we're happy to celebrate.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Now, TransLink is also among the very few agency which is very focused on innovation. You guys have an innovation program
Hmm.
called TransLink Tomorrow, and I saw the agency launch a challenge every year on different topic, and launch this problem statement, which is very good, and ask different startups or small companies or medium sized company to come and participate. I like some of the active pilots are bus stop lighting program and on demand bike parking, battery electric bus pilot, and all. Can
Yep.
you share more about what TransLink Tomorrow is and why you think public transport agencies should collaborate with startup and private mobility provider? Because sometimes they feel like, we are public, we should not talk to these companies and we
Yeah.
should be away from them. But why you think it's important they should rethink their approach?
Yeah, our annual open call for innovation is just such a great opportunity to connect with a lot of folks who honestly know more than us.
Hmm.
There's so much innovation happening in public transit these days, and it's it's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I feel like every day I see a new innovation come out. I see a new aspect of innovation in public transport that wows me and amazes me.
Yeah.
It's a lot to keep up with, right? So I think for our part, what we try to do is an annual open call for innovation around a topic that, we may need help with, or we're
Hmm.
struggling with, or we want to get other perspectives on. I think it comes from a humble place of acknowledging we don't know everything all
Yeah.
the time. So, look, we try to work with uh, a private sector to come in and generate ideas. And I think our approach is also that we do it from a pragmatic
Hmm.
standpoint. Um, this isn't sort of chasing, unicorns or just sparkly
Yeah.
objects, right? This is actually, real stuff, real projects, real innovations that can help us solve actual real world problems. So we try to take a very pragmatic approach to it as well. And I think that's served us. And you noted some of our success stories around bus stop lighting, some of our accessibility initiatives that have come out of our call for innovation.
Hmm.
It's an important part of our program, and I think it keeps us alive to the fact that there is so much innovation going on in this space. And I think it's a really good model that other agencies, to be honest, it's something I wish I had done more in Maryland, right?
Yeah.
It's not like innovation just started. There's innovation every year, and as many opportunities as agencies can give to access that and to learn, I think is just so important.
Oh, for sure, for sure. No, and working with UITP, I also get chance to see a lot of innovation happening in the sector, and I see how the collaboration work, and especially now with AI, you can't do everything in house. You
Yeah,
need to have these young people who are passionate, and some of them are, I would call them a transit geek. They want to serve the sector, so it's important way to work with them. No,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I really appreciate. It's a good way to collaborate and encourage these kind of solution in the market.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and one key thing you mentioned about, you're not chasing the solution because lot of time people just have a key without a lock. But here you're just giving lock to people and say, hey, we are looking,
yeah,
it's a real problem we are facing as on date. Can you solve
yeah.
that issue and all?
That's a great way to look
Great.
at it. That's right.
I don't want to ask this next question, but I need to. But because you just mentioned about you got the funding, but but funding is still a challenge. I think this fiscal cliff is a big challenge many agencies are facing. And I remember you posted a video a few months back, and you talk about why funding public transport is important, why the city need to do it, why the service planning expansion of bus service will be important.
Yeah.
That was a very good campaign, and I know it was very successful. Uh, Can you share what are the challenge faced by agencies for funding? I mean, why we have this challenge for funding when the costs are rising for sure, revenue is low, but do we get support from the provincial or the federal government and all? And do we need to be a little bit more innovative to solve these challenges? Like, can we just depend on the previous source of funding, or we need to be a little bit more creative to solve these challenges? What do you think about
Yeah. That's a big question. That's certainly a big one. Um, so let's see. I'll just start from the beginning. Our funding is really based on kind of three things.
that?
Fares that our riders pay. It's based on property taxes that come in through property tax revenues to TransLink. And then also a fuel tax,
Yeah.
essentially a gas tax that vehicle drivers pay, that a portion of which comes to TransLink. And so, if you go back to pre-pandemic, TransLink was fully funded. These
Mm.
revenue sources worked. And in a way, the pandemic kind of broke that funding model. It,
Yeah.
it it made it so it doesn't work so much anymore. And on the fares, we limited our fare increases throughout the pandemic. In 2020, we didn't have a fare increase at all. It was
Mm.
0%. And then the following few years, we did 2% increases. Part of that was, keeping transit affordable during the pandemic. But costs, inflation rose much higher than 2% per
Yeah.
year during the pandemic, right? So, our revenues just didn't keep up with our costs. Property taxes have remained pretty constant and and
Mm.
and, and a pretty solid revenue source for us. Fuel taxes, while increasing throughout the 2010s, we peaked in probably 2022, 2023, and since
Mm.
then we've seen a decline. Metro Vancouver, to our credit, is one of the highest adopters of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
That's great. That also means less revenue coming in through fuel taxes, right?
Yeah.
A bit of a paradox there in the way that we've chosen to fund public transit. So, what's great is, as you noted, we did a lot of campaigning, and a video that I did a couple years ago on this that ultimately resulted in an investment plan that we
Mm.
passed in 2025 that included the provincial government coming forward with funding, our mayor's council voting on property tax increases, a fare
Mm.
increase to really try to right the ship. And also provide some expansion of bus service. So the funding
Yeah.
for that also allowed us to do a 5% expansion of bus service, which is really important. Biggest bus expansion we've seen in our region in 10 years, right?
Oh,
Really
yeah.
important. So, uh, those forces came together. We chopped our deficit in half. We've extended
Mm.
our fiscal cliff out until we're fully funded through the end of 2027. And
Mm.
now I would say, like, instead of falling off a cliff, we're more rolling off of a hill,
Mm.
into 2028. And so there's still a problem to solve. I think, your question's a really good one around, do we need to be more innovative with funding sources? And, I give you a kind of a nuanced answer of both yes and no.
Mm.
Is there more that we can do? Yes. Should we look at our real estate development program? Absolutely. Should we look at our advertising contracts? Things
Yeah.
like that. Um, yes, absolutely. I will note that those are, in an organization with a $2.5 billion budget.
Are very small.
Those are at the margins, right? And do they help? Absolutely. And do we need to put effort into those? Absolutely, we do. I think we also need to be sure, though, that policymakers understand that there are these foundational, fundamental issues with
Mm.
the legs of the stool that need help, right? Like that fuel tax, that reduction in fuel tax. That is a fundamental systemic problem with the way
Mm.
that we have structured transit to be funded. That is not going to be solved by increasing our real estate development portfolio, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
has to be tackled by hard decisions by lawmakers to figure out what they're going to do, whether that's a replacement tax, whether that's some new source. The United States, many agencies have looked at a sales tax.
Yeah. Sales tax is
Um,
another.
there's lots of ways to solve it. There's no easy solution.
Ah, yeah.
And so really what we need is for policymakers, which I think has been done here in Vancouver, to take a very serious look at these foundational elements and how we systematically fund transit to be successful.
Yeah, and I also, give big hats off to you for raising this issue now. You're not passing on this issue for next years. You want to raise this issue now. It's and I tell people is always it's better to raise issue when you're not in a trouble. And
Yeah,
the campaign you did was very successful. And kudos to your marketing team. They are excellent. I see a lot of marketing team in
did a
transit.
great
They are
job.
not as creative. They did a great job.
Well, thanks.
But I think it's very important. Like you said, it's not only about doing innovative stuff, but also the fundamental, which is like and I was in China, and in China the public transport system is very big and expensive.
Yeah,
And I asked people like how you are funding, what is your fare ratio? The fare collection is 5 to 10%. And I was shocked because I thought like they are probably doing much
sure.
better. They said,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
no, our fare is very low. Everybody is free beyond 65. Kids are free,
Yep.
and fare is just 5 to 10%. I like how you're funding, and they said, I really love his line. He said, public transport is a public service. So it's like hospital, it's like police, it's
Yeah,
like any other service. So they get a lot of funding from the government, and I agree with you. You can be near creative, you can look for other sources, but we need to solve this fundamental issue. And now with fuel tax, so probably now to think about the congestion tax, like in New York. So that can be another way to raise some funding. Not easy thing, but
yeah,
but it's another challenge. Now you guys are also investing big way in TOD, transit oriented development, and I would say, like you mentioned, this is one of the success factor for Vancouver, having this TOD, having this density around it.
yeah.
And I mean, you will become now the developer, like the TransLink will be considered as, and I know many transit agencies are doing it, like in TFL London, they actually created a subsidiary for real estate development.
Yep.
So can you share what are the projects you guys are doing for TOD, and how changing the culture within the organization? Because TransLink is a transportation organization, not a development, not a
Yeah.
real estate company. So what kind of cultural issue you also face?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. We again before my time, TransLink was pursuing and discussing some type of real estate,
Yeah.
development program. We launched that back in 2022, with a real focus on those properties that TransLink owns, especially near Skytrain stations, right? So, we don't want to become sort of a speculative
Mm,
buyer out in the market, plucking up properties nowhere near transit and building towers. Like that's not the purpose, right? And also, to your point around changing culture and what we're doing there, I think it's also important that our approach has been that we are transportation experts and we are
mm.
not development
Real estate.
experts. And while we have certainly increased our capacity in that area and our expertise in that area, I think there's still a recognition that our expertise is in transportation.
Mm,
So a lot of our projects have been partnerships with private developers,
mm,
with adjacent land to parcels that we own, where we can collectively come together and generate a critical mass, if you will, of property development, to partner up and put something together, right? And so we've done that. So our first project is actually along that Broadway subway project extension I talked about earlier. It's at the corner of Broadway and Arbutus, and partnership with a private developer called PCI Developments. They've been a great
mm,
partner on this project to create about a 30-story tower
mm,
right there. So that's a really good example of where we owned some land, a private developer owned some land, right next door, and we were able to come together on a development package. But you know, they're because they have the expertise in private development. In many ways, they're kind of leading that charge. We are there. We're supporting. We're joined at the hip, and we've identified about 8 or 10 other sites throughout the region where we have amassing of properties that could lend itself to development potential. And so we're moving on those. I'd say kind of slowly but surely. We're learning a lot from the first project.
Hmm.
And so over the next 10 years, we'll see each of those kind of come to life in their own kind of unique way. But, it's another way to generate revenue at a time
Yeah.
when we need, we were just talking earlier on it's so important to be innovative around generating revenue. We're doing our best to use every asset we have at our disposal to generate revenue that can be put back into the transportation system.
Yeah, and also you are creating future riders, so these TOT
Yeah,
development actually
sure.
help to promote the transit as well. So which is a good thing. So you're creating your own customer, which is good.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
best business
that's right.
when you can
Yeah, you're exactly
when you
right.
can have your own customer.
Yeah.
Now, other important project, I think, like you're doing so many different projects. I don't know how you manage, but one other project is about the fare payment system, and I
Mm,
I know Compass Card is very I would say one of the integrated payment system in North America. There are not many few examples similar to Compass Card, but then you decided to revamp the whole payment collection system, and I think Transnet is looking to have a new kind of a fare gate and new technology and all end of the year. So can you share more about the next generation of Compass Card you guys are planning? And I don't know if you are thinking to include loyalty program and fare capping program in the new
yeah,
system.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. The Compass system was put in place, I want to say 2015.
Hmm.
And this is another area that, changes so rapidly. Fare collection
Yeah.
technology and both on the front end as well as the back end changes so quickly. And so, our contract with our current vendor essentially ends in 2030. And so here we find ourselves needing to think ahead of what we want the next
Hmm.
generation of Compass to be. And you're right, it's been really successful. I think we were the first, if not one of the first, to have a tap to pay
Yeah.
system. Uh, I know in 2023 we introduced Interac
Yeah.
debit payments for folks. So we have been leaders certainly in fare collection and fare collection technology, but over the past few years, others have surpassed us, and there are so many aspects of fare collection that we know our riders are looking for. So, you
Hmm.
named a couple of them, right? Fare capping. We can't do that under our current Compass
Current system.
system today. Loyalty programs, we can't do that under our current system today. And so you're right, we are looking to implement a new modernized fare collection technology that is really built on innovation and in connecting with customers and creating a great customer experience. So we're really excited about it. That process is well underway, and I think really does represent sort of a next generation of investments that we'll be making in fare collection.
Yeah, and I think it's also helped to improve the payment recovery because the more you make it easier for people to pay,
Of
the
course.
the fare evasion also go down. Now I'm
Yeah.
looking forward. I mean, I use the system and I really enjoy it. You can tap your credit card at the
Yeah.
airport station, and
That's right.
you can board the station. You don't need to look for ticket. Now,
Yeah.
one of the important thing this year will be FIFA. So FIFA World Cup will be in Vancouver in June 2026, 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have some pretty interesting team. Canada will be playing Qatar and Switzerland, and you have Australia, New Zealand, Egypt, Belgium. Belgium is a good team.
Yeah.
Will be also playing in the city. So I mean, the world will be watching Vancouver, and there'll be a lot of people moving from Vancouver to Seattle. So there'll be a lot of movement of people will be seeing. So how do you feel about the preparation of TransLink for FIFA, and what are the some key action plan you are planning to manage the crowd during that period? Because we are hoping there will be a lot of people coming, especially to Canada. And do people ask for free passes like to you and ask you that can
Yeah.
you get some free passes as well?
Yeah. So I haven't gotten that ask yet, but I'm sure it's on the way. I'm sure it's coming. But you're right. This summer we'll be hosting 7 FIFA games. We're very excited about that. It's about a month of festivities that will be
Yeah.
taking place, in Vancouver. Um, I guess I'd say there's a couple aspects to it. One is the customer aspect of how we engage with folks and how we
Mm.
surprise and delight folks on the system, how we activate the system to be engaging. And so, we're doing some really fun things around that with our buses. You'll see things at our stations. We may have some new products coming out. So we're going to do some really cool stuff that will be, launching, in the lead up to FIFA that we're very, very excited about. That is going to get people excited. It's going to get people coming to the region excited. We think there's upwards of maybe around, I think, 1 million people that
Mm.
are going to come to the region that are going to be traveling for FIFA games. So it's a lot of people. Um, and then you've got, as you were alluding to, the operational aspects. How do you move so many
Yeah.
people? And what's great is that from the moment people arrive in Vancouver, they've got the Canada line right there waiting for
Mm.
them, for transit to greet them. And so, what a great opportunity for transit to make a wonderful first impression on all of these newcomers. That's an opportunity. There are challenges, right? There's signage. There's people with
Mm.
multiple languages coming. How do we connect with them? How do we speak their language as best they can? How do we help them to understand our system quickly and easily? So, they'll come on Canada Line. They'll make their way downtown. And then from an operations aspect, a lot of those games will be in downtown.
Yeah.
We will have to clear our stadium pretty quickly out of BC Place to move folks. I will say that last year we had some great experience. We closed out the last 3 shows of the Taylor Swift Eras tour, and so that was actually, we looked at that as a really
Mm.
great time to practice for FIFA. We also have the PNE space, the
Mm.
Pacific Northeast Exposition area, that the PNE that will host a fan fest. And so
Fan
we've got to
first.
move a lot of people to and from that fan fest. That's going to be so important. So we're doing a lot of coordination work with the city of Vancouver, with a lot of security and safety agencies as
Yeah.
well. It is a big undertaking from an operations perspective, for sure. But our folks are really rising to the challenge, and we're just so excited to welcome everybody here in Vancouver this summer.
Yeah, and I can say, if you don't hear anything about transit during this period, it means transit is going successful. So we didn't hear
Yeah,
anything about transit during Taylor Swift show. So it means
sure.
everything went well. So
Yeah,
if
and
nobody
it did.
talk about transit, they talk about, like you said, the festivity and the games and all, then everything
Yeah,
is going well.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Now, I want to discuss a little bit about your leadership philosophy, and I really feel inspired the way you lead your team and
Sure.
always be front and share issues openly and never shy about talking problem. Like you could have say, "Hey, funding is okay till 2028. We will see after 2028." But you're like, "No, we need to talk about 2028 now." That's a long term planning. How has your leadership approach evolved since becoming CEO from a young professional and becoming a CEO? And especially now one moving countries, working in US and Canada, it's a two different culture.
It is.
The customer behavior has changed. Now the customers are more impatient. Customers want everything now, like you said, they are looking quick delivery and all. So I really love to learn your leadership style and what are the most challenging decision also for you as a CEO of TransLink so far.
Mm. Well, I think look, we're all just people, right? And
Hmm.
I think my perspective is, yes, I'm a CEO. I'm also just, a dad of a couple of kids, and I ride transit every day, and I take the bus and the Skytrain to work every day. And, we're all just people
Yeah.
trying to make it here. And I think recognizing that, people on our system are just trying to make it. They're just trying to get home to families, and
Hmm.
they just want to have a good experience. And so I think personally, I try to be personable with folks, and as humble and as I can. Um, I have a lot of pride in the work I do, and I try to be, responsive to folks, and honest and upfront with issues.
Yeah.
I don't like to dance around things. You talk a bit about the difference in cultures, and it's true. American culture is very direct. Canadians can be much more indirect. And so, I would say that, in my first year at TransLink, I bumped up against that a lot,
Hmm.
where, I'd go to my staff and I'd say, I need an answer on this. And I'd get this very indirect response. I'd say, no, yeah, I just need the direct answer to this question. Anyways, um, I think for me, I don't know that my leadership kind of philosophy has changed. It's really grounded. And I talk to
Mm,
my staff about this idea of safety, trust, and worth. This idea
yeah,
that it's so important that we convey to both riders as well as our employees that we care about their safety. It's so important that our employees and our riders trust us, and it's so important that we demonstrate that they have value, that they have worth,
mm,
that when a rider has an idea, we take it seriously, that when an employee has an idea, that we take it seriously. How we treat our employees is reflected in how our employees treat our customers every single
true.
day, right? And that, I'd say that I came kind of with that philosophy. I maintain that philosophy every single day. And so I think it's important to, treat all of our employees, all of our riders with a lot of respect and with a lot of compassion and empathy that, we're all just people. We're all just people trying to get around a big city, you know?
That's very true. That's what I tell when I talk to people is like end of the day, everybody's a human being. They have a similar experience
Yeah.
and feeling. I travel different part of the world, see different culture, and when I talk to them, I felt like they are so same. They look so different, but they are so same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what you said, I really love that point. At the end of the day, everybody's people, and I really
Yeah.
love your point about safety, trust, and worth. It's very important to have this culture. Like people should feel safe, whether it's customer or employee, and they should feel trustworthy. Like they should
Yeah.
can trust you as a leader, and then they feel worth. Like people are listening to you. And
Yeah.
no, thanks for sharing it.
Yeah,
I know.
and I'd say that something I often say to my staff is that, you all think you're in the transportation business. You're actually in the relationship business. What we're building are relationships with
Yeah,
people, and it's our organization's relationship with folks that builds trust or undermines trust, or it's the relationships a Skytrain attendant has with a customer every single day. It's really a lot about relationships and
yeah,
the belief in the system and the trust in the system, and in many respects, the funding of
yeah.
the system is all underpinned by, by the idea of relationships, and how strong those relationships are really underpinned by these ideas of safety, of trust, and of worth.
Oh, that's amazing. No, I'll tell my team the same. So thanks for sharing it. I'm gonna share this philosophy with them. Now, your journey has been inspiring, and you must like you said, you look back your journey, and it looked really good how it went there. What would you say to the young professional who are interested in mobility and transportation because they are impatient, they want to become CEO tomorrow,
Yeah.
and what skill will matter most in next 10 year? Because I don't think what happened in last 10 year will continue happen in 10 years. So what are the key messages you want
Yeah.
to give to the young professional?
Um, I guess I'd offer a couple of thoughts. Something that helped me very early on was understanding how money flowed.
Hmm.
How to, at the end of the day, I don't want to say like money is the only thing that gets things done. I mean, again, relationships are very important, but at the end of the day, you need to fund things, and understanding how to work TransLink is a bureaucracy like any other transportation
Yeah.
agency. Transportation agencies are big bureaucracies. You've got to understand how bureaucracies work, and how to move the levers, and how to allow funding to flow from one area to another area to make a project happen. So, part of this is understanding like how your system works,
Hmm.
is, I think, so important. And I think something that I gained a lot of insight on at the beginning of my career, in understanding how federal funding and how state funding worked and made its way to local transit agencies.
Yeah.
Um, and then I guess a second piece that I would encourage folks is, it's so important to have people that can look at a big picture, that
Hmm.
aren't just stuck on, you know, um, there's a service planner that wants to be a CEO one day, and they're designing a bus route. That's great. How does that bus route fit into the bigger picture plans of the organization? What strategic need is that bus route serving for the organization? How could investments in that bus route, serve the organization and riders even more? I think, being able to take your piece of work at an organization and applying it to the bigger picture is just so important. We have a lot of folks, and look, that's a skill set, right? That's a skill
Yeah,
set. Some folks have it and some folks don't.
that's true.
Some folks like that bus line and that bus planning is what they should do, and bus scheduling is what they should do the rest of their lives. And that's fine. We need good people who can do that. We equally also need people that can take a look at those bus improvements on a macro level
Hmm.
and see where it fits in the organization's overall strategy and make decisions based on that, you know?
Hmm. So these are two important points, like you said, like having a vision, like looking
Yeah.
at the bigger picture
Yeah.
and how system work. It's not only about bureaucratic system, but any system, any company, if they work, if you don't understand how the system work,
Yeah.
you will not able to achieve anything. So
That's
these
right.
two are very good, important pieces. Now, last few question, and one is, I mean, I have to ask this question about AI. It's a buzzword. Everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence, a lot of digitalization technology and all.
Yeah.
What role does technology like real time data, mobile ticketing, AI play in service delivery at TransLink? And are there any innovation from other transit agency globally that you're looking to bring to TransLink? Like, do you feel some of these technologies should we bring at TransLink?
Yeah. To be quite honest, we're taking a very careful approach with this.
Hmm.
I think all of us have seen the benefits that AI can bring. I've met with a series of AI technology companies that have shown what it can do in
Hmm.
scheduling, in project development, in big capital project schedules. How do you optimize the schedule of a big maintenance facility you're
Yeah.
building, and show how it could be faster, and teach AI about previous projects, right? Like there's so many cool technologies that are out there. I think we are taking a bit of a guarded approach.
Hmm.
I talked earlier about, around innovation and just being careful around making pragmatic investments that we're sure can solve problems that we need to solve. And
Yeah.
I'm always hesitant to go, make investments, spend millions of dollars on a solution that sure is cool, but maybe that's not a real problem we needed to solve.
Hmm.
And so I think for our part, we're certainly studying the broader impacts of AI in the transit industry and how it's being used. I think it's also important to recognize that advances in AI are happening at just a breathtaking pace
Every day.
right now. It's unbelievable how fast AI has moved. I mean, I imagine, what we would have invested in a year ago versus today, because it's
It's
it's changed so much. So, I think we're seeing a lot of these technologies also very converging right now, and trying to evaluate, what we can expect next in some of these transportation technology changes. Certainly, our future will involve harnessing
hmm.
AI to the best extent we can in a smart, pragmatic way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the job of CEO is not easy. You don't want to be too early and you don't want to be too late. And
Yeah,
finding that right balance is always a challenge. And I can understand. Like you don't want to be a first one to experiment and fail and lose the money, and you don't want to be too late, because then you cannot actually get the benefit out of it.
yep, yep,
And other major technology which is rapidly growing every day is autonomous vehicle, AV. And we see now Waymo, they are doing commercial pilot in many cities around the world. I'm pretty sure in Canada we will see soon some of these product will be launched.
yeah, yeah,
And I feel, it can be a threat to public transport. It can be a complement to public transport. It can play a role. And because now public transport is not only about bus and train, because people are using different mobility options and they want to do. How do you see TransLink role in the broader mobility ecosystem? Like you guys are looking to implement AV, you're looking to implement other shared mobility option. How you see that technology can be helpful, or you feel it as a threat to TransLink?
yeah. I don't think it's a threat necessarily. I mean, I think the BC government was the last one in North America to allow TNCs like Uber
Yeah.
and Lyft to come in. And so I think, this is a region and a province that has taken a very careful approach to new technologies and understanding their impacts before they allow it, if you will,
Yeah.
before they permit that kind of thing. And some of the things that we're seeing with power outages in San Francisco and cell phone outages that grind vehicles to a halt, I think is a bit of a call for us
Yeah.
to be sure we're taking a look at these technologies before we make really big investments. Um, I think, certainly autonomous vehicles or aspects of autonomous driving, I think are going to be important. For our part, we are looking at, things like self parking pilots at our
Okay.
at our bus depots, right? So this idea that as a bus comes in, it can self park essentially. And I think what we've seen is that in doing so, we have the ability to save a lot of space. So, real
Hmm.
estate in Metro Vancouver is
It's
very
great.
expensive. And so if we can, save, I don't know, 10% at each of our depots, and we've got 7 depots, we just saved 70%
Percent.
of
Yeah.
space. Maybe I don't need to build a new depot because
Yeah.
I'm able to optimize the parking, right? So I think there are some real great specific use cases that are going to lend themselves. I think for our part, we are very much focused on the safety aspects of connected vehicles. Cars being able to, speak and sort of connect with buses as they approach red lights from a safety perspective, or see
Hmm.
pedestrians or cyclists nearby from a safety perspective. I think, we're focused a lot on those aspects of it and the safety aspects that I think are likely to kind of roll out first from a technology perspective. Um, I think as it relates to autonomous buses in, say, downtown Vancouver or nearby, I think we still have a ways to go on that.
Hmm.
But we know it's on the horizon. We know that technology is changing so rapidly, and we've got to be ready for it. I think for our part, we're kind of dipping our toe in a few different areas right now to kind of see what makes the most sense for us as an organization.
Yeah, and you already have automated trains, so
That's right.
that
Yeah,
I tell people, like, if you have automated trains, so it doesn't matter. That's our part of autonomous mobility. And
yeah,
like you said, some of this technology, like you mentioned about self-parking buses in the depot, not only space, it can also save manpower. We are facing
that's right.
shortage of manpower, and the cost is very high. So no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. I think really enjoyed the conversation and really learn some good lesson what you guys are
Oh, for
doing
sure.
in
Yeah,
Vancouver.
yeah.
Generally, I end this podcast with this rapid fire question round, and I ask
Uh-oh.
quick 5 question.
I gotta
So
get
if
ready.
you
Yeah.
okay, so my first question: if you were not in transit space, what other profession you would have selected?
Well, I love the position that I'm in. I love the profession that I'm in. I'm also a big lover of nature, and I always had dreams back in secondary school of being like a park ranger, like working in a
Ah,
park. And so, being out in nature, I don't know, maybe there's a future profession there for me somewhere.
post retirement in Vancouver, there are a lot of parks.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
it's a nice
Yeah.
job. I met one guy, and they shared some funny story. Which is your favorite city in the world and why? Don't say Vancouver, but
Yeah.
I know.
Vancouver is lovely. I've always loved Paris. The Paris transit system is wonderful, and Paris itself has so much history and is very beautiful. I've spent some time in Florence. I
Mm,
think Florence is very beautiful. So I think there's a few different cities that I particularly like to go to. Yeah.
great. And which is your favorite book or podcast? Don't say TransLink podcast. I know that's an amazing one, but
Yeah.
any other favorite book or podcast you have?
Um, hmm. I'm a fan of kind of classic books,
Hmm.
like Hemingway. One of my favorites is Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, is a wonderful book about kind of self-discovery, and I think I lean towards more some of the classics than any of the recent stuff. I'll be honest, I listen to some podcasts. I don't listen to a ton. I listen to a lot of music. If
Oh,
folks see
okay.
me, if folks see me on the Skytrain with AirPods in, it's usually music that I'm listening to. I do listen to podcasts from time to time, more local kind of politics ones, but I listen to a lot of music.
The politics one. Yeah. But in one of the podcasts I heard, like your son played the drum. He's a drummer in the local band. So
Yeah,
it's in the family, huh? The music
yeah.
love
We
is in the family.
it's a musical family for sure. Oh yeah.
No, that's great. What is the one thing do you wish you should have learned early in life?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think that a lot of us options are good and are always available, and
Hmm.
it's important to always position yourself in such a way that you have options available to you.
Hmm.
I think, I do a lot of mentoring. A lot of folks come to me with big decisions they have to make in their life, and I think they often feel trapped. They've been offered a job, and oh my gosh, they've got to make a big decision,
Yeah.
as though this is the last job they'll ever be offered. There are other jobs out there. This may not be the one. If it doesn't feel right, don't go for it. But leave
Hmm.
yourself in a position where you have options available to you. You should always be making an effort to do that.
Hmm. Great. And this is my last question. If you can change one thing in life, what would it be? It can be your
One
life, it can be journal life. If you can
Change
change
one
one
thing
thing.
in life. I don't know. Maybe I'll take this one back to transit, because I am such an advocate. I do wish that a lot of folks, say car drivers, understood the benefits that transit brings to them. I wish that governments understood the economic benefit that investment in transit made to a regional and a national economy. Um, it's investment in transit is truly a force multiplier, right? It is
Hmm.
it is a multiplier. And, you know, we just can't invest enough in transit. It's what moves our communities. And so, we have governments that set these high housing targets. And, if you set these housing targets, but you don't think about the surrounding infrastructure, and whether that's transit or utilities or schools or hospitals, housing isn't all there is. There's all these
Yeah.
supporting pieces that have to have investment in order for communities to be successful. And I guess if one thing I would change in life is I wish that, governments and, elected officials understood that, and understood the value that transit really does bring and the way it can change people's lives.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a great point, and that's why from UITP side we are actually creating this World Public Transport Day on 17th of April each
Yeah,
year,
yeah,
and the
yeah.
purpose is same. Like how can we celebrate transit and promote the use of transit? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really enjoyed this conversation.
That
Thanks
was
for
great.
sharing and thanks
Yeah.
for your time. I know it's a busy period for you, but I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This was really a lot of fun. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like this episode, please don't forget to give us a 5-star rating as it will help us to spread the message. If you have any feedback or suggestion for this podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at info@mobility-innovators.com. I'm looking forward to see you next time. Thank you.